Titanfall 2 features a diverse range of factions, each bringing its own unique flavour to the battlefield, from the ruthless mercenaries of the Apex Predators to the cold strategic precision of General Marder's Ares division. You can serve as a pilot to pretty much anyone, even a Marvin. But do you really know who you're fighting for? Do you know the lore behind some of these factions? Do you know why this legend of a droid has his own battalion, or why Robert Barker Torbe is constantly trying to drink himself to death? No? Well, that's the sort of info I'll be covering in this video, getting into the nitty-gritty details of each faction and maybe throw in a few of my own theories as well. And bear in mind, I'll be using the wiki to fact check most of my knowledge, but there's always a chance of slip-ups, so feel free to correct any mistakes in the comments below. In terms of playable factions, there are 7 you can choose from in multiplayer, and I'll be focusing on these for the video. It's important to note that these factions can be split into essentially 2 groups. Some are fighting for the IMC, and some are fighting against. The Marauder Corps is the faction you play under in the campaign, and it is also the first group you unlock in multiplayer. Technically, Jack Cooper is actually part of the 41st Militia Rifle Battalion, but this is just one of the many subgroups that fight under the Marauder banner. Even the Marauders are themselves a unit of the Frontier Militia, which is the resistance group that does the bulk of the fighting against the IMC. They were also the first to produce the Vanguard class of Titans, this also being the only Titan design that the Frontier Militia have actually made themselves, rather than nicking from the IMC. Even though in its early days Vanguard Titans, take BT for example, were only available for SRS pilots, I'll talk about them later, the IMC quickly caught on and mass produced their own version, which could be used by whomever, and they called it the Monarch. But that's not really important. Why exactly are the militia and the IMC fighting? What's it all for? I won't get too into all the details because I'm thinking of making a full lore drop video, but essentially the IMC, which also used to be known as Hammond Robotics, the company that originally made the Titans, decided that there weren't enough resources and minerals to harvest near Earth and the planets surrounding it, so they branched out further. This edge of space that the IMC began to mine was called the Frontier, and you can't mine everything with just robots. You need humans to oversee and manage and make sure nothing goes wrong. So the IMC brought settlers out to the frontier to colonize it and populate these worlds. And while everything was going well out in the frontier, wars and major conflicts started to crop up near Earth and the worlds around it. So the IMC gradually pulled out all of their troops and sent them back to fight these wars. So the frontier and its colonizers were left in peace. This continued for several generations, with life in the frontier relatively simple. The colonists had flourished because of the plentiful resources on these worlds, especially compared to the smog-filled atmosphere of Earth. Until eventually, once the core world wars ended, the IMC came back to mine all of those plentiful resources. They declared ownership of everything in the frontier and re-established their military, economic and political presence there. Understandably, the colonists were not happy with this, and after years of trying to solve the situation peacefully, they decided to take matters into their own hands and form the Frontier Militia. Now you know a little bit about the militia and the IMC as a whole, we can go back to the Marauder Corps, also known as M Corps. Sarah Briggs is one of the central figureheads of the Frontier Militia. She is also the commander of the Marauder Corps and the SRS, and as such will be the one leading you out of the dropship in multiplayer. The SRS being the Special Operations branch of the Frontier Militia. Not only that, but M-Corps seems to be a subdivision of the SRS itself, so M-Corps riflemen can be sent to provide support to SRS pilots. So I'll be honest, it gets hella confusing trying to keep track of all these subgroups and micro-factions. Essentially, M-Corps is part of the Special Operations branch of the militia, and as such would be sent on missions of great importance or ones that require a higher level of secrecy. This is why Sarah makes such a great commander for it, because of her expertise in intelligence and logistics. She is also a trained pilot, but the main reason for her rise to prominence was her skills as a commander. I'll be honest, there isn't anything super deep to dive into regarding the M-Corps and its leader, hence why it's the default faction in multiplayer. So let's move on. The Apex Predators are a mercenary unit comprised of elite pilots under the command of Kuben Blisk. They fight for whoever the highest bidder is, regardless of morality or ethics. I'm going to ignore most of the events of Apex Legends, because most of that lore takes place way after the events of Titanfall 2. However, there are some important bits of info that we can glean from the game, so I'll add those where necessary. This means that there are 6 Predators that we know of, 5 of which Jack Cooper kills during the campaign, leaving Kuben Blisk to offer him a place in the elite mercenary unit himself. We'll start with Kuben, then detail some of the most notable achievements of the Apex Predators, who they work for, and all of that, before quickly running through each of the members. Kuben started his career at a young age in the Thunderdome games in the Outlands, even though he was born on Earth. This is most likely what inspired him to create the Apex games.
You're better.
When the Titan Wars began, Kuben enlisted in the IMC, where he quickly climbed the ranks to commander. However, all the politics, corruption and bureaucracy pushed him into becoming a mercenary, as he wouldn't need to answer to anyone and could fight for himself. Kuben's first contract with the IMC earned him more than enough money to retire to a tropical paradise somewhere, but frankly the offer to continue working with them was so good, Blisk didn't refuse. Not to mention the access he'd have to advanced military hardware and the option to lay waste to everything in sight. It's important to note that this was Blisk working as a solo contractor, but eventually he decided to create an actual mercenary group so he could take on more advanced projects. This let him win a contract from General Marder and his Ares division. Their main objective was to protect the fold weapon, and as such they were stationed on Typhoon and asked to oversee security operations. Each member of the Apex Predators was given command of their own IMC units and a specific area of the planet to patrol. Kane is the first Apex Predator you will actually encounter as Jack Cooper, not including that starting cinematic. He's incredibly wild and unpredictable, most likely because of his known drug abuse. Kane is in command of a Scorch-class Titan, but ultimately is no match for you and BT. As part of his contract, Kane was sent to guard the Reclamation Facility, which is where you end up fighting him. It's Kane's radio that Jack steals to listen in to the Apex Predator communications. Ash is the next Apex Predator you fight. She has a much more interesting backstory compared to Kane, but she's also in command of Vincent Dynamics, so I'll talk about her more then. She pilots a personalized Ronin Titan, which kind of ties into her whole martial arts, samurai type shtick. She was assigned the IMC Dynamic Testing Facility to guard and oversee. The facility was typically used to train IMC personnel and to test experimental military hardware like the Reapers. Ash subjects Jack Cooper to such a test in the campaign, much to Blisk's annoyance. The whole thing ends up with Ash supposedly destroyed, but we know she was later salvaged and repaired by Vincent Dynamics, hence how she's able to appear in multiplayer.
Vincent Dynamics is grateful for your work. Let's go.
Richter was a cloak pilot, user of a modified Tone class Titan, and also a member of the Apex Predators. I'll be honest, there's not loads of lore behind him, apart from the fact he's obviously a bit of a psychopath, evident when he tried to cut off a rifleman's ear to keep as a trophy. Apparently the character is loosely based on Arnold Schwarzenegger, and there's a few references to this, but apart from him being likely Austrian in origin, there's nothing major to note. Viper, on the other hand, was a much more successful mercenary. He can be likened to a fighter pilot and used a North Star Titan with a heavily modified chassis that permitted it to stay airborne for an extended duration of time. His aerial combat is unmatched and was able to take down several militia aerial troops while only sustaining minimal damage. Despite this, Jack managed to gain the upper hand while fighting him on the outer hull of the IMS Malta.
Commander Briggs, this is BT-7274. Viper is down.
Sloan is the final known member of the Apex Predators and was Kuben Blisk's second in command. She piloted a modified Iron-class Titan that was shown to have a phase dash ability and a very lengthy laser core. But apart from this, there isn't a whole lot more known about her. I may have gone on a little tangent talking about the Apex Predators because they aren't super integral to Blisk and the actual faction, but there you go, a little refresher doesn't hurt. With the Marauder Corps and the Apex Predators covered, that makes Vincent Dynamics next, which is handy because we talked about Ash just a minute ago. Vincent Dynamics is a company rather than a mercenary group. They manufacture both Titans and weapons and are responsible for several pieces of equipment that appear in-game. This includes the Monarch class Titan, EM4 Cold War, and the T-203 Thermite launcher. They also manufacture simulacrums, hence why they were able to repair Ash after her encounter with Jack Cooper. The whole company is very secretive and no one knows their true purpose, but having conducted operations both for and against the remnant IMC fleet, you can infer that they are very much out for themselves. Ash would organize operations with mercenary pilots to recover black boxes containing data relevant to Vincent Dynamics' interests. We know Ash was trying to recover data about her past, but anything other than that is unknown. And that's pretty much all we know about this secretive company. In terms of Ash though, there's a lot of lore behind her, especially because she's such an integral part of the Apex games now, but it's not exactly relevant to Vincent Dynamics, who is the actual company you're fighting for, so I'll leave it for now. The Angel City Elite is next on our list, captained by none other than our favourite pilot with a penchant for alcohol. The Angel City Elite, or ACEs for short, are a mercenary group but highly sympathetic to the militia's cause, and as such are under contract with them. There's much more known about Robert as a pilot than his mercenary group, but it's worth noting that after the events of the Titanfall 2 campaign, the Aces have not distanced themselves but take a much less integral part in the militia's operations and are searching for, I quote, other mysteries within the frontier. Robert used to be an IMC officer and fought on their side during the Titan Wars, conducting several legendary operations that would greatly help the IMC's war effort. Unfortunately, the Titan Wars left a mark on Robert. He didn't adjust well to civilian life and thought the answer to his questions was at the bottom of a bottle. Eventually, due to his drinking habits, he was discharged from the IMC and took up residency in Angel City. Robert was actually somewhat of a celebrity there due to his previous feats in the war, and eventually was actually forced into joining the militia because of his old friend McAllen. He was found drinking in a bar and was involuntarily extracted from Angel City by several riflemen and pilots who gave their lives to ensure his safety. This is because the IMC were just about to organize a sector sweep, ultimately putting a bounty of 50,000 credits on Barker's head. The 6-4, on the other hand, is much different to other bounty hunting organizations. They don't do it for the money. The freedom of the frontier is their highest priority. There isn't any backstory for them because the first time they show up in any Titanfall game is during the later stages of the Battle of Typhon, which happens at the end of Titanfall 2's campaign. There are only 4 known members of the 6-4, but we'll be focusing on their leader, Gates, as she's the one that leads us out of the dropship in multiplayer battles. Gates is very much a maverick. Although she believes in the liberation of the frontier from the grip of the IMC, her and the 6-4 go about it in their own way rather than following the militia's command structure. And judging from her voice lines, everyone in her faction seems to be pretty equal and on even footing, fighting for what they believe in and building strong bonds as a tight-knit family. The Ares Division is another playable faction in Titanfall 2's multiplayer. Its full name is the Archaeological Research Division, and its founder and leader is General Marder.
We shall restore order by superior force.
Stick together!
As a funded research wing of the IMC, the main purpose of the Ares Division is to find, uncover and exploit indigenous and ancient technologies across the frontier. One of the faction's main responsibilities was of course guarding and investigating the Fold weapon, which was found on the planet of Typhoon and is the main focal point of Titanfall 2's campaign. The Fold weapon was an ancient alien superweapon with the power to devastate entire planets. Marder intended to turn this weapon against the Frontier Militia and wanted to use it to wipe out every single planet under their control. Even though the planet was heavily guarded with both ground and orbital defenses, and General Marder was there to oversee operations along with the contracted Apex Predators, they still lost and the Fold weapon was destroyed, much to Jack Cooper's and BT's help. As far as I know, that's pretty much it lore-wise for the Ares Division. However, there's a little bit more we can glean about General Elias Marder. Marder is a high-ranking IMC officer, and as you can probably tell, the most important thing in the world to him is his research. He places great value on protecting the core worlds and the IMC's interests, and views the frontier as simply a means to an end. And obviously to him, the Frontier Militia is simply an angry mob standing in the way of humanity's progress and their expansion across the stars. Marvin's Finest is a playable faction, which is obviously led by a Marvin. The interesting thing is that we can see what directives the droid is following, and it's pretty obvious that Robert Tarbe was the one that gave him the orders. So this guy's literally just been leading his own little group of pilots because Robert forgot to dismiss him. The date given is actually a week before Titanfall's release, so we're getting on to 11 years now. There isn't that much else in terms of lore to say about this faction, unfortunately, so I guess that's it. We've covered all 7 playable factions, and I'd like to make further videos delving into Titanfall lore, so make sure to like and subscribe so I can see there's demand for such content. Thanks for watching.